Hello, I'm Blaze and welcome back to Warframe. Update 15.7 dropped a lot of cool stuff on us left, right and center, and I am just as prompt as ever, so let's start off with the Convectrix already. The Convectrix is a converging beam weapon of corpus design that takes a few cues from the earlier phage, but has a physical damage spread instead of being focused on viral damage, and fires two horizontal beams instead of a whole plethora of beams in all directions. To get your hands on the Convectrix, you can pick up its blueprint from your nearest clan dojo's energy lab for 15,000 credits, where the manufacturing in your foundry afterwards will require a further 30,000 credits, 5 field drawn, 10 control modules, 900 oxium and a fully built forma, and a mastery rank requirement of 3. Alternatively, if you want to get your hands on this thing immediately, you can instead pick it up pre-built with its own weapon slot and a pre-installed catalyst for 175 platinum. The Convectrix is a shotgun class weapon and, as such, will use shotgun class mods, but also shares functionality with beam weapons like the Phage does. Its maximum range is 25 meters and has a physical damage spread of 100, or 50 per beam, spread between 80 slash damage, 10 impact damage and 10 puncture damage. How a laser delivers impact I'm not sure, let's just call it space magic. Along with its reasonably high physical damage is a fire rate of 3 rounds per second, which is actually not bad for beam weapons, and an entirely reasonable reload time of 2.0 seconds for its 90 round magazine capacity, or battery charge units as the case may be. For supplemental stats, we have a pretty high status chance of 25% per second. Normally this wouldn't be especially great on a shotgun, but beams change the calculation a little bit, such as being affected by fire rate where normally it wouldn't. So it has potential as a status weapon, though being reliant on physical damage will dilute the pool of possible status procs. Finally, its statistics are closed off with a 10% critical chance and a 2.0 times critical damage multiplier. Not really worth modding for itself, but the occasional crit will give a nice boost and, like most weapons, it will amplify the effect of Arcane Avenger. Oh, and it comes along with no innate polarities in spite of needing a forma to build. I really wish they'd stop doing that. I suppose it's not as bad as having a D polarity in the first slot, but it's still kind of bothersome. What makes the Convectrix true to its namesake is how the beams work. You have two fire modes. The primary fire mode starts from the outside and has the beams converge on your point of aim after a little under a second, with the secondary fire having the beams start on the central point of aim and move outwards until they reach their maximum spread. When they reach their final positions, they will stay there until the appropriate trigger button is released, at which point they will have to traverse back to their starting positions before finally cutting off. This is an interesting idea on paper, but in actual use it results in some wasted battery charge as you need to wait for the beams to converge on your intended target. It does afford some bonus damage against groups, but it's not really enough to be worthwhile, I feel. Worse still, I feel that the secondary fire is currently bugged. After doing some testing, I found out two things. 1. Each beam for the primary fire does twice the damage of each beam for the secondary fire. The base damage as reported in the arsenal is now 100, but it seems that the primary fire applies that as 50 damage individually per beam, and then multiplies it across both beams for 100 total base damage, while the secondary fire takes 50 as the maximum damage and then divides it among the beams. This results in the secondary fire being massively underpowered. And even worse, it seems that currently, multi-shot doesn't affect the secondary fire, but does affect the primary fire. With nothing but Hell's Chamber equipped, a single beam from the secondary fire does about 30 damage per tick, while a single beam from the primary fire does between 100 and 120. And when focusing both primary fire beams on the charger, the damage per tick increases to around 250. I suspect this isn't working as intended, and it leaves the secondary fire mode as more of a third wheel. I guess it's still useful for breaking open storage containers, but not much else. Aside from that, the time it takes for the Convectrix beams to converge is fixed. Vicious Spread and Tainted Shell will increase and decrease the maximum spread respectively, but will not change the time it takes or the final pinpoint accurate position of the beams, and likewise increasing and decreasing fire rate will also not affect the time it takes for the beams to switch positions. With this in mind, I found modding the Convectrix rather difficult. I wanted to include Seeking Force to improve its performance against crowds and Sinister Reach to increase its effective range, but I personally just couldn't fit them in without leaving the Convectrix feeling too underpowered at high level missions and struggled to get through even T4 Exterminate without dying. So going back to the drawing board, I arrived at this build instead that worked a lot better, even if it isn't what I wanted. Aside from all the mods to bump up the base damage, I elect to go with Shotgun Spaz to increase its rate of fire to ramp up its damage output significantly, and Shotgun Ammo Mutation to offset the resulting ammo inefficiency. Although it doesn't counterbalance enough, so I still found myself running out of ammo, but it was actually able to slice enemies apart effectively. And of course, Blaze. This isn't as good against Corpus, but against any other faction it works well for either just heat damage or for radiation damage versus Grineer units. And honestly, the base damage increase works fine against Corpus too. Heat damage isn't great against shielding, but Corpus are squishy anyway. I'm gonna be honest, I'm pretty lukewarm on the Convectrix. After using the build I outlined a moment ago, I did get it to perform reasonably well, but it became something of an ammo hose as a result. And the beam converge thing is kinda clunky since you need to wait for it to wind down before the Convectrix actually stops shooting, which I feel gets in the way. Although mercifully you can cancel this with a reload if you want to save some ammo, but doing so in the middle of a fight is obviously a bad idea since it kinda takes you out of action until the reload is finished. You can feather the fire button to sweep the beams along an area in front of you, which is a cool idea, but in practice that tends to waste ammo and doesn't kill enemies fast enough to be worth it. It's a better idea to just focus the beams and cut the pie around a corner to deal with large groups, or just rake the focused beams around the group instead of trying to get the beam flourishing thing to work. I tried, and it's a gimmick that is more likely to get you killed at higher levels. It probably works just fine at low levels, but yeah. The Convectrix is at least okay, and I do quite like how it looks. It looks quite sturdy, and the sound design is pretty strong with changing sound cues as the beams converge and finally meet. But I'm going to say that unless you really love the idea of this line cutter mechanic thing, or you want to give it a try for your own reasons, it's probably not going to blow you away. And if you have a phage all built up already, that's going to go double. Thank you for watching my look at the Convectrix. All comments are appreciated, and I hope to see you around next time. For more content, you can give a click down below to go to my video on the Ninkondi Nunchaku or the surprisingly stellar Cyanoid Simulor. And as always, good luck, have fun, and take care.